Vlad Tepes, whom the Ottoman Turks named Kaziglu Bey, the Impaler Lord, through his atrocities ensured the name Dracula would live on in infamy centuries beyond the grave. Once upon a time, in a land beyond a great forest, there was a nation known as Wallachia. The people who lived there, the Wallachs, were the dominant cultural group in the region, not just in Wallachia, but in neighboring Moldavia and Transylvania. The Romans named these people Dacians, but they sometimes called them wolfmen, for they bore a standard with a carved wolf's head and a banner streaming behind like a snake's tail. Today, the descendants of the Dacians and the Wallachs are known as the Romanians, and Transylvania, Moldavia, and Wallachia are all part of the modern Romanian state. But at the twilight of the medieval period, Wallachia stood for a moment at the crux of world history, squeezed by two empires. To the north, the Kingdom of Hungary, already claiming all of Transylvania. To the south, the Ottoman Empire, already claiming Bulgaria and most of Serbia. The ruler of Wallachia, a type of grand prince known as a voivode, had to contend with these two superpowers, balancing appeasement and opposition to maintain personal power and independence for their principality. The voivode of Wallachia was always chosen from amongst men of a single family, the House of Basarab, descended from Wallachia's first prince, Basarab the founder. The House of Basarab, however, was divided into two feuding branches, the Draculești and the Danești. The Danești were named for Dan II, better known as Dan the Great. The Draculești are named after Vlad Dracula, the Impaler, and to a lesser extent, his father, Vlad Dracul. The name Dracul famously means dragon, and Vlad Dracul took it as his own after he was knighted into the Dragon Order by Sigismund, Hungarian king and then soon-to-be Holy Roman Emperor. Dracula means son of the dragon, and the Impaler's brothers were also known to use the name on occasion. Emperor Sigismund supported Vlad's claim to the Wallachian throne, but unfortunately for Dracul, the voivode of Wallachia does not rule alone. The House of Basarab had other lords of the land to contend with, and the most powerful of these were the Boyars, roughly equivalent to the richest barons and earls of Britain. The Boyar nobility were actually quite common in Eastern European states like Russia, Bulgaria, and territorial Romania. They are most easily distinguished from their Western counterparts by their style of dress. Boyars favor long Byzantine-style robes and large, fuzzy hats, symbols of wealth and authority. The larger and furrier the hat, the more important the boyar. The most important of the boyars served on a council in Wallachia, much like a modern cabinet, but the Wallachian council were notoriously conniving. They could not match the voivode's personal power alone, but relied on factionalism, playing the Draculești and Danești against one another, constantly supporting rival claimants from within the same family, whilst also dallying with the rival interests of Hungary and the Turks. Cousins were constantly usurping cousins, sometimes fatally, but sometimes the crown could exchange hands between the same two contenders multiple times within a span of several years. The Boyar Council of Vlad Dracul supported appeasement of the Ottoman Sultan. Vlad Dracul did not. The Sultan claimed Wallachia as a vassal state and did not appreciate Dracul's efforts to undermine his authority. He took Vlad Dracul's two youngest sons, Vlad and Radu, as hostages against the voivode's good behavior. Taken at a young age, both boys were raised and educated by the Ottoman Empire. Vlad and Radu shared tutors with the Crown Prince Mehmet, who would one day breach the walls of Constantinople. Vlad Dracula and he were very close in age, but Vlad hated his time with the Ottomans and was frequently beaten for his impudence. Radu was beloved at the court and became one of Mehmet's closest companions. Both Mehmet and his father, Sultan Murad, were said to have taken Radu as a lover. This in part earned him the sobriquet Cel Frumos, the fair, the handsome, the beautiful, a nickname that has led to a suggestion of weakness. But Radu held a respected position within the Ottoman Empire. Still in their boyhood, Vlad and Radu both became imperial officers. Radu would serve the Ottomans faithfully for the rest of his life, widely rumored to have converted to Islam. But even Vlad Dracula, one of the Ottomans' most notorious enemies, saw his first battles under Ottoman service. But their father, Dracul, would not serve. He acknowledged that betrayal likely meant the death of the two boys, but he had other sons. One, remembered now as Vlad Kalugarul, the monk, was illegitimate and never officially acknowledged in Dracul's lifetime. But his eldest legitimate son, Mirza, was Dracul's co-ruler and heir. Together, father and son went to war with the Turks, expecting Hungarian support to protect themselves and their nation, and also expecting the Sultan to kill the boys in revenge. They would be surprised on both fronts. Sultan Murad, perhaps due to his improper interest in young Radu, spared both boys, and Hungarian support would never arrive. Vlad Dracul's patron, Emperor Sigismund, had died, and the new king, Albert of Habsburg, was no friend to the Draculesht. Albert and John Hunyadi, the renowned White Knight, Ottoman foe, and Prince of Transylvania, supported a Danesht coup against Vlad Dracul. Prince Mirza was poker-blinded and buried alive. Dracul was betrayed by members of his own retinue somewhere beyond the city walls of Târgovişte and cut down. Local legend says that as Dracul lay dying, he entrusted his sword, the Toledo blade, to a boyar named Kazan, who had been his chancellor and had remained loyal. Kazan was charged with delivering the blade to Dracul's heir, Vlad Dracula. With or without his father's sword, history holds that Vlad Dracula would soon march from Adrianople at the head of a small Turkish force to retake his homeland. The Danesht voivode, Ladislav, had no intention of fighting Vlad Dracula or his army. Ladislav was supposed to be helping John Hunyadi fight the Turks at the Second Battle of Kosovo Polje, but he didn't quite make it there either. He seemingly sat between Dracula and Kosovo, picking up soldiers fleeing the battle to bolster his numbers. The Turks soundly defeated Hunyadi, their arch-foe, and with his loss, they had removed the last barrier to Constantinople. One battle avoided, Ladislav decided to finally march his swollen army on Dracula at Târgovişte. By this time, the Sultan had recalled Dracula's own support. After reigning for at best a couple of months, he would have to abandon his homeland just as he had taken it, without a fight. He found help from his maternal first cousin, Stefan, Prince of Moldavia, called Stefan Chelmer, Stephen the Great. Vlad Dracula and Stefan adventured together for some time before Dracula reconciled with his father's enemy, John Hunyadi. Through Hunyadi, Dracula had gained what his father had lost, Hungarian support. Modern scholars also suggest he found his first wife in Hunyadi's natural daughter, though the first bride of Dracula and her true name remain lost to history. With Hunyadi behind him, Vlad Dracula easily retook his throne. History holds that he slew Ladislav, the usurper of his father, in single combat, before taking revenge on the rest of his father's betrayers. Ladislav's brother, Basarab, Dracula had buried alive, in repayment for his brother's ignominious murder. Having finally achieved his father's throne and avenged himself on his Danesht cousins, Dracula would next take revenge on the schemers of the Boyar Council. On Easter Sunday, Dracula had the Boyars seized. The old and the infirm were impaled along with their families. The rest were force-marched in their holiday finery to a place known as Poinari, where they worked as slave labor to restore a ruined fortress that would become Castle Dracula. Having at last come into his power, Dracula would not be idle. This, the second reign as voivode of Wallachia, would forever solidify his reputation as the monstrous Impaler.